As y'all know, it's your girl, Miss Well and Woke. Hey, Royals. And I'm here with my bestie, my sister from another mister, my ace boon coon, Miss Lady A Savage.
Hello, everyone. I love the intro.
Right? So we wanted to do something very special for y'all called Who Woke the Savage. So if you guys like what you see, continue to join us. We're going to give you really good energy. And so our first topic to kick it off, friend, we're going to hit them with a little bit of roots and branches. Like, Lady A, tell them what roots and branches, what we finna give right now.
So pretty much, it's a mix of, in order to get into a healing process, you have to start at the root. And that's where we want to start at. The root of how in your family you were raised and different things that pretty much got you to where you are in the healing process.
110%. Like, I was reading this quote the other day, right? That was like, people who were raised in survival mode operate different than people who were raised with a lot of love around them. And I feel like that plays out in a lot of our relationship dynamics. Like, everybody has a set instinct to how to navigate a relationship with other people. And if I constantly feel like I'm on like battle mode, how do I truly like connect with another person? But like, that's a learned behavior, right?
Yes. But you know, we had a conversation a lot where it's like, you are how you're raised. And we say this all the time. We're like, however you're raised, that's why everybody looks at things differently because of how their household dynamic. So it starts in the household dynamic.
Do you feel like the dynamic to like how a family is designed has anything to do with it? Like, I grew up in a blended family. So I grew up where I had siblings from both parents and they came together and they created me, and we kind of merged all those different ideals together. But everybody may have had a different experience, upbringing prior to them joining forces. And then, you have single parent families or nuclear families where they look a little differently. So I feel like everybody's family dynamic is a little different depending on who also they're raised by and who they grew up with. Some of Black households are like heavily grandmother led, right? And
Yes.
I know that my grandmother's a major influence. And for those of us who have grandmothers who, let's say, like church grandmothers, like that's a heavy influence in terms of upbringing too. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, like I used to get that little nudge in church if I
You have to praise the Lord,
wasn't,
saying grandma.
you know what I'm saying? Like, praise the,
Every
praise the
every
Lord type of
Sunday,
grandma.
you at eight
And
o'clock service, 10 o'clock service, and 12 o'clock. And you better hope it's not a 3 o'clock service.
and that actually bear a lot of how like my upbringing was shaped on that side. I feel like when you watch the people around you, the women in your family, the men in your family, you get certain perspectives on how to navigate those relationships and situations, right? And I feel
Mm.
like actively having a relationship with my mother, actively having a relationship with my father, I watch how they navigated their marriage. My parents are still married. Like, I learned a lot through them. I learned some of the things that I want and some of the things that I don't. And I feel like the people that I've been in relationships with have a similar dynamic. Like, they learned a lot from the people around them. Sometimes that's a blessing and sometimes not so much.
Mm. So I feel like I know with me, you know, my parents aren't together. So they were married when they had me. So, but it still was at the point of probably around the age of 5, they were on the rocky part of the marriage. Around high school, they separated. So my parents are completely separated. But I feel like you said, because of seeing certain things, you're kind of like, it's certain points in that marriage where you're like, yeah, it might have been bad, but certain things I wouldn't mind having. But other things you're like, no, I'm okay on. But also, like you said, the upbringing is different. So I look at stuff so differently with certain things because also with me being the only child. So that's a whole different dynamic in itself as
That's a
well.
whole fact.
Or whatever the case may be. I have siblings that's on, you know, like half siblings. But as far as like in the household, I was only child. So that was a whole different dynamic in itself. And that's why I said, depending on how you raised, completely different. So how you are with certain things, I'm like, absolutely not.
110%. It's interesting. You brought up the term like half sibling. I wasn't allowed to use that as an expression growing up.
Oh,
Like, being that we were a blended family, my mother felt like the term half sibling was an insult. because
Mm-hmm.
she's like, you know, when you have a blended dynamic, like you love that person with your whole heart. You know what I'm saying? Despite whether both parents come from the same place or whatever the case is, that's still your sibling, right? So I feel like that's something that I always really, really took to. That although we may have different parents originally, a lot of the ideals that we grew up with were foundationally the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it's different when your siblings grow outside of your household because that's a different dynamic. And then when you have some siblings that you grow up with in the household, even if they have different parents, right? Because mom's rules, dad's rules, it's all set into stone about what we're trying to follow and what we're supposed to be doing in the household. And I think that, did you grow up with a lot of structure? Because I feel like that's a big thing. Like parenting style has mirrored a lot of how I feel like I operate as a person.
Let me tell you something. Structure is an understatement. Okay. So the goal is to be here. Okay, it's here. There is no here. So
That's the
growing up,
bar.
the bar is up here. So C's, all that stuff. What are you talking about? Like you're supposed to be a scholar and a star, and your face is supposed to be on the front of every magazine and newspaper. And when they come and ask somebody, do you want to be a part of this? You better put your hand up and raise it because you need to be in the front of the line.
You know, and it's crazy. Like when I reflect on stuff like that, I do say that I had two types of parents. So I feel like my father was very authoritative, and my mother was an authoritarian, right? Which like there was like a balance between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Like she was a warm parent. She was fair. At the same time, she ain't play no games. Which my father was like, he don't want to hear nothing. Children are meant to be seen and not heard. And
Okay.
I feel like in current dynamics, when I look at like how our kids are being raised in this generation, they're taught to be a lot more expressive. And I feel like that communication piece is really going to take them a lot further in terms of building healthy relationships, right? That dynamic of, you know, you do what you're told, you comply,
Mm-hmm.
is very difficult nowadays. And I feel like it plays into our relationships as adults, right? A lot of women are not playing what they call submissive. They're not doing what they're told, which would maybe a concept that was taught. And so I feel like it all plays into one another, right? When you think about going back from the beginning, we talk about historically, right? Like what the black
Mm-hmm.
family looked like. There's so many different periods where the black family has changed. Like rooted from slavery, you had the separation of mother and father and children by force. You had women who were being brutalized and tortured and sexually assaulted in front of their partners. You had the male partner being, you know, emasculated in front of his woman, sold, beaten, and disrespected. You had the child lose early contact with their parents to foster relationships. And there's a book out there called The Body Keeps the Score. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people feel like what was experienced during slavery is actually like embedded in the DNA for a lot of people. And it's not just within, I say, like our cultural groups. Every cultural group has a certain family dynamic that plays out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that people I know within the Asian background, they have really strong relationship ties to their grandparents. They view them as authority symbols too. Like I said, the grandparent is a very important feature in the black home. The grandparent is a very important figure in the Latino home. So there's a lot of people within minority culture groups that we value having at least multiple people to make up our village.
And that's how we always been. That's why they always say it takes a village to raise a child. But like you said, I feel like with every culture being different, especially like because I can only speak for the black culture, so you know how our culture is. And like you said, I do agree with slavery kind of being in our DNA a little bit. I can agree with that because there's so many of them traits that lead on and keep going, and we're trying to break them. And that's the whole point of now that every generation you want to be better and want to do better and break that generational curse.
I feel like we have the tools to get there, but for some reason we keep running in the same circle. And that's the problem what I have, you know, as a collective. It's the same conversation again and again. We know what to do, but
Mm-hmm.
are we applying it? Right? It starts with the communication piece. It starts with like where does our morals lay at? You cannot foster a healthy relationship with anybody that you don't share at least similar ideals with, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think people try to force a lot of things like, well, in my house, the toilet tissue roll was rolled over. And in my house, the toilet tissue roll was rolled under. Now we having the same argument again and again and again and again based off of something that we learned when we were younger, something that was like modeled or mirrored to us.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates a conflict in ongoing relationships. You may not tie your shoes or put your shoes on like how I do. Doesn't mean the shoes ain't gonna go on the same feet, right?
It still
But
works. You do
it
it your
still
way, and I'm
works.
gonna do it mine.
But and that's I think that's like the craziest problem I feel like that we have today is like we can't meet somewhere in the middle. And a lot of people don't do the introspection to figure out like why is it that I function this way? Like there's a new thing that they're teaching kids in school, which I find like really, really interesting. They don't say like, why are you doing what you're doing? They're saying like, what happened to you? Like
Okay.
what's creating that as a situation? And I feel like that's the same respect that we have to ask in relationships, right? Like I can't just be like, you keep doing the same thing. Why are you doing that? Like what's going on for you that allows for you to move this way?
But it goes to the communication, because then this is why we have the circle. Because I ask you why, and you have some people that have that tool, but then you don't tell me why.
Facts.
So we have to kind of get to that point too, because it takes a certain kind of piece in you that is willing to do the work to find out why you are making those steps.
It's true. Like I think that it's hard for people depending on what type of family you grow in. Like no matter like how you were raised, like what type of like, what the structure was, who was in the household. There are very core elements to building healthy relationships, and there's really key elements to an unhealthy situation, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we have a lot of people who can say they grew up in large families with lots of people, so they can perceivably have a really big village, but there was a lot of toxicity in the home, right? And when you see all that toxicity in their household, it may not be aware to them. They may not have that awareness, right? Until they meet somebody else. And I realize that about a lot of people. A lot of stuff that you feel is okay, that you feel is like right to do amongst other people,
It's not
it
okay.
takes for you to be introduced to a whole nother person to give different energy.
Mm-hmm. So
You
like you
know,
said,
so
with you having like a big family, so you have that experience. So with me being the only child, certain things, and we've had that conversation with certain things, it's kind of like I'm more selfish too. And I'm not saying it's right, because it's not. But with being the only child, I'm used to having my way. I'm used to having certain things selfish, my own this, my own that, certain things. So growing up later on in relationships, that does become a little factor, because it's that separation, it's that distance of having to now combine somebody in your space and
but
take that selfishness away.
But you know what, that idea about being selfish isn't necessarily a negative thing. It could be about self-preservation. Like
Mm-hmm.
one thing I grew up thinking is because you have siblings, right? Like having siblings has taught me that you have to be selfless. You have to share, right? You got to look out for other people. But how long do you do stuff like that before it becomes a disservice for you, right? So everything has its time out. And I realized that now in today's age, using the word selfish is not a negative thing. We had such a negative connotation around being a selfish person. We thought that being a selfless person was at the hierarchy. But when you really think
Mm-hmm.
about it, right, being able to prioritize your needs first
Yourself.
allows you to interact with other people better. But that's not what we're taught essentially. Black people believe in what's called collectivism at large, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
means both parts make up a whole. And if we work together, we can get a lot further. And then we constantly come into things where we're like, well, why are we not getting a lot further if we're trying our best efforts to work together? That's one of our foundational understandings. But like you said, there's also a new perspective that's like, I tried working with everybody, but I felt like I was doing the work and not everybody was contributing. So then we learn to be selfish,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everybody's now reclaiming it. You have a lot of people taking it back and saying, like, this is my selfish era. Like, I'm
And
gonna
like you
focus on me.
said,
I gotta go further.
and like you said, as you get older, you realize that that really isn't a bad thing. Because honestly, if I'm not no good to me, I can't be no good to nobody else. So if I'm not okay, I can't make sure everybody else is okay, because I'm not okay. So then it gets to a point where it's kind of like that's why the reclaiming of the word had to become a thing, because so many people focus on everybody else and then they get burnt out, and then you sit up here and you ain't got nothing left for you at the end of the day.
Right? And that's a struggle. But it's like Where did you get that concept? If you ever watch, like, just if we go with like watching your mom or watching grandma get
Mm-hmm.
down in the household, moms and grandmothers historically will make sure that all of the kids eat first, right? Depending on household. Now, I've heard other
Mm-hmm.
women say, well, you know what? In my house, my husband eats first. He's
Mm-hmm.
the first person that eats, and the kids eat next, right? Very different dynamic. So it really does contingent upon what was taught to you and what was prioritized to you, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
think about like just some of like the nuclear families that we've seen, like watching somebody like a Jay-Z and Beyonce and how they interact with their kids, right? Who you see the children spend majority of the time around, right? They're usually with the grandmother, they're usually around the mom. You see some interaction with the father, but you largely see them around like the maternal side of their family.
Mm-hmm.
I was taught a long time ago that children tend to gravitate towards the maternal side of their family. So a lot of how they operate and function can be based off of that interaction because women tend to be the nurturers in that situation.
Definitely understand that. Because, like you said, even now, if you think about it now in a lot of households, it's kind of like, even with the women being working women now, back then, a lot of women weren't even working. So they were taking care of the house, the kids, everything else. Now you have the working woman that still comes home and takes care of the kids, preps the meal, wash the clothes, make sure everything is okay. And I'm not saying that some households that other things aren't arranged. But like you said, it's kind of goes back to, like that said, like that DNA pickup because of what you seen. So you picked it up and you kept it going.
I used to have a hard time, like when I would listen to some people. I believe in reciprocity, right? Always believe there's a 50-50 situation to any relationship dynamic that exists, right? Everybody has to do essentially their part. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, I understand that that may exist with some level of roles, but nobody's role outweighs the other.
Yeah.
I feel like I had a relatively healthy example of let's all do our part in that regard, right? But I think that the piece for me that I wish was modeled a little bit better was how to effectively communicate when there are challenges. When there's a breakdown in communication, I feel like that's what creates a lot of negative energy. And a lot of people grow up seeing that, where it's like dad may go to work, mom may go to work. Mom may hold it down, dad may hold it down. But when it's time to have conversations that include children and parents, there's something that's missing within our generational dynamics that I feel like hasn't gotten much further down the line.
I feel I feel it's getting better. I don't think it's as bad. I think it's definitely improving because I know, speaking for me, in our generation, a lot of our generation definitely came from like you said, not even having kids in the same room, not even discussing a lot of things. Your parents went through a lot of things that weren't even discussed because they decided to keep those things to themselves. And I always say that if I knew a lot of things that my mother went through earlier, I probably would not have done some of the things that happened to me if that line of communication felt like it could have been open towards your child.
And like you said, you feel like it's improving now because we're of a certain age, right? I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that dynamic, the conversations that I could sit down and have with my older relatives is very different than what I was able
Mm-hmm.
to have as a child because there was a such thing as staying in a child's place.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had the type of parent, which I always love this, is that my mother encouraged me to ask questions, to be inquisitive, to challenge things if it doesn't make sense. So many people within our community have been in hurtful situations where they a lot of bad things happen to them because they were never taught to question authority or to challenge things that don't make sense. So I feel like
Exactly.
by having the type of upbringing that I have, where my mother told me to challenge what doesn't sit right with you. If
Mm-hmm.
it makes you uncomfortable, you can come to me and ask questions. So many kids did not have those same experiences. And I mean, even with the work that I do now, I still see that playing out,
Mm-hmm.
So that communication piece has to be there.
So I know, like with my mother, like certain things could be challenged. So like if it was something else outside of certain things, yeah, you can bring that. Don't let nobody step over you. Don't let certain things like this happen. Okay, cool. But some of them harder conversations, that have happened to a lot of, in Black households, some of those conversations, no, that could never been discussed. Now, my father, on the other hand, that was my discussion. That was my counselor. It was like two different things. So with my father, it was like anything you could say. So my father knew of a lot of things that have happened that may not have even been discussed on that end when it came to that. So it was one of those things.
I love that, but you know what? I think every child needs to have a safe adult. Like every
Yes.
child needs to have a safe adult that they can go to and have conversations with about anything that's going on in their world. Because a lot of the first place that you learn is in your household. That's your first source of information. Like if we talk about the concept, they say nature versus nurture. That is that
Mhm.
nurture component. Whatever I pick up in my household, I'm going to go out into the world and I'm going to reflect it back. So if it's misinformation that I'm getting from people outside, I should be able to go home and have somebody hit me with the right thing. I should
Yes,
have
ma'am.
somebody be like that counselor, that mentor, that support system, that open ear, that open door. And that's a big thing that I think in our community that we create some of those connection points, close cousins, close relatives. But like you said, when it comes to those difficult conversations or more shameful conversations,
That's when
there
it
seems to be
gets
like people
quiet.
stepping back. Yeah.
That's when it gets quiet. The room gets silent. But those are the conversations that needs to be had because those are the conversations. But later on, like you said, some kids, children, young adults moving forward would not make a lot of mistakes they would have made if their parents told them these stories. If you
A
felt
hundred.
comfortable enough to sit down and tell me these things that have happened.
I had to learn my mother as the woman that she is, right? You always used to put in your parents in those hierarchical roles, of course, because they're your parents. So you're like, that's my mom. This is her role. This is who she is. But before she was your mother, she was a woman and she existed in this world. She had her own trials and tribulations and experiences, things that you
Mm-hmm.
can benefit and you can learn from. Same thing from your father. Before he was your father, he was a man in this world. He had trials and tribulations and experiences. And like you said, you have to be able to see both sides of who people are, the dichotomy to us as human beings. And I feel like that does play into, like I said, when I meet people nowadays, it's really important for me to get to know them and know different things about them, right? Not just what they believe in or what's important to them. I have to get to know a sense of like, what is your value system and like where does it rank, right? So like there's some
Okay.
people who be like, man, I don't give a fuck about family. And when I hear people say that, I'm like, okay, that may be true
That's
for you.
you. That's
That's
like
you.
that's your decision.
You may have had a lot of toxicity in your life growing up, right? But I was like, but family's a priority to me. How can I have
Mm.
a healthy connection with people who say, family is a very low priority to me and family is a very high priority for me, right? How do we meet in the middle and how do we have a healthy conversation about that so that we're on the same trajectory?
Mm. And that's a hard one in general because you have a lot of people that say families on a low spectrum, but then you want to sit there and say, but I want all these kids. Hold on now. We got to find a balance because make that make sense.
That, let me tell you something right now. Now that's one of those conversations that I feel very, very, very keen on because the whole children aspect. There's a lot of people who be like, well, kids are little gifts. They come when they come. Like, you know what I'm saying? If they pop up. No, I believe that in this generation, we have to be intentional about the partners that we pick. Like, family planning has to exist. If you all the way left with your opinions on how to raise kids, and I'm all the way right with my opinions, we got to have a clear communication and dialogue, or maybe we don't need to
But
do this
you,
together.
but you know what? At the same time, we do need to take some personal accountability in here because the thing is this: a lot of people was laying down raw, rawing it down, knowing that this is not a person, that if something go wrong, that you want to have a kid with.
But you know what? That's the thing because that's the two personalities that we were describing, right? The person who's raised with the love, and sometimes the person that's raised with the survival. The person who has survival needs, they tend to get into relationships to make sure that they always have a safe place. The person who's raised in love is like, well, I'm always doing the selfless thing, right?
Mhm.
I'm always looking out for somebody else in an extension. And I feel like that's what creates that coming up against the wall dynamic. If somebody is seeking survival mode all of the time, they gonna lay it down raw and hope that, hey, the best shot at it is creating a family that I always
No,
got a
ma'am.
good place.
No,
The
ma'am.
person who's in a loving situation is like, well, you know what? I lay it down raw and this is the outcome. I'm gonna love whatever comes from this situation. We kind of teach ourselves or condition ourselves to believe that we have to maintain those types of dynamics based off of our experiences. Some people it's easy to walk away. Some people they feel like they got to stay until the end. If you have parents who had a bad marriage, there are a lot of people out here who have had parents who had a terrible marriage, but they'll hear their mother or father say, I ain't never leaving that person. Right?
That's
And then you got
right.
people in our generation now, like if the marriage goes down after we say I do, the very next
I'm
day I'm going to
out.
the courthouse.
I'm out. I'm out. I'm out. But see, also, and that's the thing too, because I feel like that's where the generational curse thing comes in, right? Because, for example, I've had this conversation with my mother where she was like, remember I said they were together for a good portion of the time I was a child. So later on, being an adult, she pretty much was like, if I knew what I knew now, she was like, I would have left a long time ago, but I stayed because I wanted to keep the family. I wanted to keep the whole dynamic and this, that, and the third. And I was like, me being the person I am, I said, honestly, you could have left. Run, run, run. Because don't put yourself in a situation where you up
Baby,
here
don't do it for me.
suffering. Don't do it for me. Don't. I get it. You want to sacrifice yourself for your child, but don't do it for me, baby. Because at the end of the day, if your piece is messed up, that drains onto your kids too. So you feel it as a child. You feel the disturbance. You feel the toxicness. You feel that it drains off. You see, mama tired and all this type of stuff. You see, mama is struggling and just another day done went past and I'm with this man again. Like, no, baby, if you
Those
gotta
are
go, don't go.
those are like micro traumas that people don't even know that they have. They don't even realize that watching there's a big thing that says that your parents should never argue in front of you, right? You should not grow up in a household, whether it's mom, dad, auntie, uncle, cousins. If there is a lot of yelling and arguing in your household, that creates a traumatic response for you, especially when you get older and have different interactions and relationships. So people don't realize like the things that are sitting there right in that dynamic, right in your household, really do set in. Like if mama, if you feel like every day is a fight with dad, every single day, like you said, there's no peace in this household. I never see you smile anymore. I don't see a warm interaction between the two of you. Why are we carrying this on?
Don't make your exit.
But with like, that's the thing. There's something that encourages people to stay in very toxic situations, right? And you mentioned one of those things. Sometimes people say it's for the kids. But what about people who don't have children? There are people who don't have children who still stay in very toxic situations,
That's a fact. But then,
right?
like you said, because we've had that conversation before, it breaks down to a lot of things. You have kids. You got some people that do it for financial. You have a whole
Survival.
bunch of different things. Survival, like you say, you have a whole bunch of things that come into play that come to these things to why it's like I'm gonna try to thug it out until something breaks.
I think that culturally within all of our communities, self-love is something that needs to be taught and really fostered from the jump start, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great emphasis to say that we have to have close connections and family supports and healthy relationships, but you rarely hear people put an emphasis about how you protect your own peace, how you build fortitude for yourself as an individual, right? How do you make sure that you're mentally strong? How do you say no when things aren't okay, right? There's so many times I realize that's what people have the hardest time just saying no. Like, no, I can't do this for you. No, I can't handle that situation right now. No, I'm not available to you.
You know what? I'm gonna tell you something right now. I used to be one of those people, and then I turned into Destiny's Child. Do you hear me? Okay. No, 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 no. Like, stop playing with me. But I've been there. I get it because I've been there where like you just it's something in you where you just feel like you know what I'm saying, you just gotta say yes, you gotta be helpful, you gotta be all these things. Yeah, That's all right. It'll turn. It'll change. Trust me.
I'm gonna tell you, like, I feel like I grew up around the type of woman that will give you the shirt off their back. Baby, if you're lacking, if you don't have it, if you need something, I got you. So I feel like that was a quality that I admired until it became one that became a waiting one for me. Damn, I gotta give you my shirt today and tomorrow? Shit, you just not gonna figure it out? I gotta do what now
Come on.
again?
I gotta give you my shirt every Tuesday. Like
That's
every Tuesday.
you know what I'm saying? Like every Tuesday. And so I did have to check it because I saw something too that just like really resonated with me. Like I saw a girl post on the internet. She was like, when we say stuff like, oh, I'll give the shirt off my back to the next person, she said that's an example of a lack of self-love. Just because you're giving to somebody else at your own personal sacrifice, you
Mm-hmm.
never learn to truly prioritize yourself. And that's a problem. And I realized like that is a dynamic that's taught, like especially amongst women, that you have to give and give and give and give and give and give and give. That's the examples that are often revealed. And then I meet people all of the time where maybe they have the opposite. They may have families that were very distant or very cold. They don't
Mm-hmm.
feel like people actually gave a damn or invested or were interested in them. And that played into a lot of how they navigate why they may be perceived as either selfish.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a, for everything. Everything is enough.
They tell you no for everything. You be like, damn, can you help me with
Would
the
you
bag? No, I
try?
got it. I didn't bring it. I didn't make it heavy. Why'd you ask?
Like,
They
would
like
you
the
try?
least helpful people ever. Like, you know what I'm saying? So,
But it's
but
like you said, you gotta find that even balance. That's what it is. You gotta find the even balance of being caring, but not draining yourself at the same time. Because you have some people that's worth the care. They're worth the. Like I said, I have a good. I don't know. I'm gonna say a top 5 that right now. Here you go, shirt off the back, easy, right? Without a question. But it's one of those things where it's that love back and forth for each other. Where you have some people, like you said, would depending on the dynamic. Now you're draining, you're using me, you're doing this on purpose. Something you you're just trying to take from me. You're not even trying to pull back into me. You just trying to take from me. You done took the shirt. You ain't come back like, here go your shirt back. Here you go. I got you another shirt. I done made a quick come up. Nothing. You just left me. And then you gonna come back and you gonna keep doing it because you know I'm still sitting up here by your side. Like, here you go. Here's the help. Here's the help. Here's the help.
you know, it's so crazy. When I was younger, I used to watch like my grandparents, right? They had a very, very, very long marriage. And it used to be so crazy because, like, my grandfather, anything that he wanted to eat, grandma made. Anything that he
Mm-hmm.
wanted to watch, grandma put on the TV. Anything that was important to him was equally important to her. And then I remember being a kid one day, and I was just like, "Well, I don't want to eat what Grandpa eating. Can I eat something else?" I swear, my grandmother almost hit me with the back hair real quick. Like, what you mean, right? Like, and I had to be like, "Well, I don't understand. Like, you know what? In this dynamic, like, you're prioritizing him, right? This is somebody that you value. Am I not equally important? Don't you value me too? Am I not a part of those 5 people that you would give the shirt off your back to? If he's eating biscuits and I just want, like, you know what I'm saying? But I just want a piece of wheat bread. We can't just make that little division to make it work. But and it's like you said, it's a dynamic thing because there was a level of importance that she placed. At this current point in my life, the only person who's getting a shirt off of my back is myself. I'm changing the shirts. I'm keeping the shirt on my back. Like, that's the reality. I'm no longer in a space where I can freely throw my
Just give out
t-shirt.
shirt.
I can't give out shirts, right? We as a people tend to deplete ourselves at a constant, and we make excuses, right? You can have those 5 people ideally that you say, hey, I would do anything for,
Mm-hmm.
right? But those 5 people can also use that and drain that down to the wire.
And that's how 5 become 4. That's all I'm saying. What happens is it's gonna drop.
Process of elimination, we picking people
We
off.
out of here.
We hand
Quick
that
game. Stop
eject
playing. We
button.
dropping. That's how you start dropping numbers. Because eventually everybody gonna show themselves. You can only keep up an act but so long.
Mm, that's very true. That's true. people do eventually reveal themselves. And I mean, like we learned that that's an age old concept that like if you start off a certain way, you have to be able to maintain or keep up with that level of appearance. And eventually something is going to show your true test of character. And I feel like that's usually happens when the chips are down. See, like a lot of people may have grew up where if their family was struggling, right? Like I said,
Mm-hmm.
everybody did something to try to pick things back up. But then you always had that one relative that cut out.
Mm-hmm.
They was going at the first time of crisis. Family struggling, they're like, oh no, I'm gonna go hang out at my friend's house. I'm gonna go do something else. I'm not gonna sit in the struggle with y'all. Y'all ain't eating tonight. I don't know what we gotta do, but I'm gonna go down to Keisha's house and I'm gonna get something to eat.
Stop it.
There's a lot of people who don't stay in the thick. And so I realized that that idea that we have around, hey, like I can maintain support in this small group of people, you got to
Mm-hmm.
keep it on a person by person basis. You can
That's
maintain
right.
healthy relationships with people and still have them at arm's length. It's a
That's
concept
true.
you got to learn. Like I said, I'm no longer a person to give you my t-shirt, but I will teach you how to make one. I'll show you how to create the t-shirt.
Let me tell you something right now. Let me tell you something.
I'll
At least
point
she'll
you to
do
the store to
that.
where to go buy the
You know
t-shirt.
what though? At least she'll do that because I feel like I will say this because we definitely was talking about the black household and the black community. That's a thing in itself. If you're not going to do it, give the blueprint. Help. Just help a little. Just give the direction. Like, hey, if you go make a right, make a left at the stop sign, you'll see a little shop right there. They sell t-shirts, 50 cents right there, real on sale.
Free game. Every
And
lesson
feel
doesn't
like
have to be
I feel
learned the
like that
hard
is
way.
one thing as a community we do have to work on. We have to work on building each other and helping each other because all these other races are doing it.
But see, that's the thing. Ideally, if you go back, like I said, historically, we are a group of people who do believe in collectivism. We lost that sense of collectivism being here in the
Mm-hmm.
United States against our will. We lost a lot of our initial values. If you see a lot of families who identify within, like I said, other dynamics of like African culture, they do believe in
Mm-hmm.
collectivism. We still move as a community. We still invest in community. We still build community. And if you're talking specifics to Black people by way of America, that's something
Mm-hmm.
that was lost because we were moved to a place that didn't value the idea of collectivism. It was every man for themselves.
That's facts.
And we've learned to adjust to that. We've assimilated to that idea of every man for themselves.
The
And
crab
like
and the
I said,
barrel
there's a way to
mentality.
right? There's a way to protect yourself. There's a way to really, really like protect your peace and maintain that level of self care for yourself and still incorporate I'm looking out for other people.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way to strike that balance. That's a conversation that I feel like is lost amongst a lot of people, right? There was always a time where they said we talk go back to that village concept, right? Grandma
Mm-hmm.
used to be grandma for everybody on the block.
That's the
Grandma was
thing though.
everybody for grandma on the
That's the
block.
fact. That's the fact because I'm gonna tell you something right now. My grandmother lived on Broadway. And when I tell you that's a street in Baltimore. When I tell you she was grandma to everybody. The whole Broadway block, okay? And Broadway stretched a long goddamn way. That whole goddamn block, okay? You hear me? She could knock on anybody's door, hey, watching kids doing this, that, and the third. You got your own grandkids, your own people, your own kids, everybody. She out here making up, like you said, giving out dinner plates, popsicles, freeze cups, all type of stuff, snow cones. Grandma on the whole block.
Who you telling? Feed area and anybody. But like I said, but grandma was also no sucker, right? You had to move a certain way. Like, I'm not gonna let you be disrespectful. I'm not gonna let you violate. I'm gonna look out, but you also have to move with a certain common courtesy.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's something that's a lost art in today, right? You have too many people, especially I swear a lot of the kids in this generation, the hand is out, but they're not taught the foundational skills on how to move. There's
You
so many
know
times
what?
I realize that people don't say things like, please, thank you, excuse me. People don't ask basic salutations and greetings. How are you doing? And in response,
Mm-hmm.
like asking the other person what's going on with them. These are like, I realize that everybody doesn't have that mirrored in their household. You ever heard somebody say, "Did I go to bed with you last night?
Yes, all the time. My mother's favorite line is to say that
Did we sleep together?"
all the
Right?
time.
Like,
If you walk up in there and you walk up in some room and she's in that room already before you got there, did I sleep with you last night? Oh, I don't think so. Oh, okay. Hello to you too.
right? It has to be taught from somewhere. You know, I was thinking about this the other day, and it's so crazy. Like, we were talking about just that breakdown to like getting back to, like I said, the roots and the branches, the foundational values that we had as a kid, which really
Mhm.
plays in. I think a lot of people are struggling to find peace and happiness because they're not only, they say, searching for it in the wrong ways, they're looking at examples that may no longer exist.
That's a fact too.
You know what I'm saying? You can't say that you want that old school love because that old school love may have looked really good,
Mhm.
right? Those really long relationships, those marriages where it's like, well, maybe the man took care of this and the woman took care of that. You may not find that same level of balance being struck. Also, I don't know what Miss Mabel was going through in her house.
Not Miss
I don't know if Mr.
Mabel.
Earl was knocking Miss Mabel's lights out. I don't know. I was always
No.
taught never to read into other people's relationships and their dynamics. And I feel like
Mhm.
that's something that has shifted and transcended. Like, we have to reestablish what the new normal is. We have to come up to an agreement of like what healthy is moving forward. We got
Mhm.
to throw away some of what we learned in the past, and we got to keep yield to some of the good parts. Some things was good,
But you
some of it was strong.
know, also with that, sometimes people want that kind of love, and like you said, because you don't know what they went through, and some people know what people went through, and still you want that old school love, but like don't really want it completely. If that makes sense, like you want that old school love, but you know that came with you did the house, you did this, you did that. He went to work. You might not have that much say so, but you ain't ready for that. You don't want that. You don't want that no say so, like you said, and also the behind the scenes stuff, like you said. If Mr. Earl was popping her, you know, we talk about that all the time. With certain people, depending on the dynamic, it takes away some of your control. It takes away a lot of things.
It does. It really does. I feel like you can't you can't want the same exact relationships that you witnessed growing up,
Mhm.
but you can, I feel like, pro and cons it. And I'm one of those people. Like, these are the things that I value with human interaction, right? I want people around me who have a sense of self-respect for themselves. Starting off, if you respect yourself, 9 times out of 10, you'll be able to engage other people and have respect for others.
That's
I guess
that.
I could tell when I'm interacting with somebody who doesn't have a lot of care for their own personal existence and well being. Can't be on my team. You know what I'm saying? That has to be the core of it. So I feel like just those different, like I said, those pros and cons for me, like especially like somebody who, if they see somebody who's in, not, I can't even say like in need 100%, but somebody who needs something very, very small, like a random act of kindness, and they
Okay.
never have it in them to give. That's a con for me. That's a con as a personality. And I'm always like, where'd you get that from?
Like you said, it depends. And that's why, like we said, it comes from however you were raised. Because, like you said, some people are straight in fight or flight mode. We're like, hey, it's about me. It's about this. I ain't got nothing for nobody else. And then you have some people, like you said, it seems to me, you found like that even medium. And that's why I said it's about finding that even medium where it's like, look here, I can help you. And I have no problem helping you, but I can't go outside this realm to the point where it's taken from me. But I still can help you in my own way. Now you can take it or you can't take it. It's up to you. But at the end result, you won't get what you need. But you won't get there on your own, but you gonna get there. I'm gonna help you get there. I'll be by your side. I'm gonna help you get there, but you gonna get it.
So, what are the family deal breakers, like in that regard? Like, what's
Mm.
something that absolutely is unforgivable? And we already know what's at the top of the list. Any sense of abuse is out the window. Like, I don't care what relative, who you are,
But you
like all of that
know
stuff.
what?
If anytime there's an abuse situation, I feel like those are those situations. Whether or not you find peace and forgive,
Mm-hmm.
you don't forget stuff like that.
You know,
That's one of those situations where we're not gonna have that same,
but
repaired.
I need people to understand too. It's abuse on all levels. I think sometimes people just focus on the physical, when sometimes people don't even know how bad the verbal
Who, girl?
abuse can be.
Who you telling? Emotional and verbal abuse
What you be
are
up here
just
everything
as.
but a child of God to some people.
If you see like brain imaging, honestly, the same trauma occurs for somebody who's experiencing like long-term verbal abuse as somebody
Mm-hmm.
who experienced physical abuse. It still impacts you mentally,
Yes.
emotionally, and physically the same exact way. It really doesn't matter. Like words have so much power.
That's why I tell people now, one of mine is your octave can't go up but so high talking to me. Okay? We can have a conversation. But if that octave get about over 6, 7, we ain't
Little
talking no
decibel.
more. Yeah, that's the cat right there. About a 6, 7. Cause see, you might get a little theatrical. You might get a little in tune to what you're saying. That's cool. About a 6, 7, 7 at the cat. It go over a 7. We ain't got nothing to talk about. Cause see, I'm gonna think you trying to see me about something.
But you know
What are we
what?
talking about at a 7?
I have a pet peeve for people who feel like every time there's some level of confrontation or conflict,
Mm-hmm.
that it means that you're having an argument, right? Why can't
Right.
we disagree? Why can't we disagree about something and have a conversation about it
That's
that
true.
doesn't have to escalate?
That's,
Those are
that's what I'm
really,
saying.
really big pet peeves. Like where I feel like when you have a conversation with somebody and they feel like it's getting a little intense, oh, you arguing with me. Now we in
No,
full blow, like you said, fight
no.
mode.
If we talking, we can talk, and like you said, we can agree, disagree. But then you have some people that want to get up and start being like, "Well, da 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 da." No, see now you going a little too far. We can talk like how we talking right now. You hearing what I'm saying? I'm not hearing what you saying. We having a conversation, and we might be disagreeing or agreeing with each other. However the conversation go.
Mm-hmm.
But when that octave start getting too high, and you start getting a little too into what you how we moving, I'm gonna have to let you know, like, baby, you gonna have to bring it down a notch because I don't know where we going with this for a second. Just bring it down just a little bit. I hear you, but we're gonna have to bring it down just a second.
I wonder why it's so hard for people to have those conceived concepts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because yelling to everybody is not the same thing. Like yelling may not trigger one person the way it triggers the next, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's how we look at yelling. There are so many people that say, "Oh, I talk loud." I used to hear that
Mm-hmm.
growing up all of the time. Like I talk loud. I'm like, well, it's too loud for me personally. I like you said, I need you to lower that volume down because it gives me the experience that you're yelling. It wasn't until I actually got to Baltimore where I learned that talking with my hands for some people is like a sign of a threat. And
Mm.
I was like, everybody around me talk with their hands. Like
We
we
had
two finger and a
that
thumb
conversation all
in.
the time. We be like, New York aggressive as hell.
Right now, see for real, like literally, because she was like, "So I feel like you want to fight," and I was like, "Why do you assume that we about to get into a fight?" She's like, "Cause you see how you talk with your hands. I'm talking with my hands right now. Like it communicates. It's just another form of communication for us, especially in New York, that really just speaks to our passion about things.
Respect.
But it can also be misinterpreted. So I realized that when I was talking to people in a different place, like I said, whether it be friends or relationships, they were like, every time I see you put up your hands, it gives me an indication that like you about to be on fight mode or something's wrong. And it may trigger somebody a little differently than what it meant for me.
That's true.
Yeah,
Well,
right? Like for us, it improves our communication. Like where I came from, it helps add to the conversation. I know if you're serious about something, I
mm-hmm.
know that you mean it. I know that you're really interested in it. If I see you talk with your hands, opposed to the opposite, you know.
I feel you. But we are at that point where we're
Ah,
at the savage question.
savage question time.
The
Okay,
savage question time. We're running on about 9:18. So we're gonna get to the savage question.
I'm curious if y'all in the comments, like, make sure you write in. Y'all can leave us a little bit of how you want to
Yeah,
answer this question too. I'm curious.
yes, you can. Also, if you have any questions that you would like to see in future episodes, please DM me your questions and I'm taking all questions. So, for this savage question, why do people tend to turn a blind eye to dysfunction in their family instead of confronting the truth?
I think personally, the concept around respect and loyalty make us feel like we have to stay in situations that no longer serve.
Okay.
Um, so many people feel like a respect for the older members of their family without even questioning whether those
Mm,
relationships warrant that level of respect.
mm,
And I think that's enough to keep people in really bad situations. Like, I used to hear stuff like that all of the time. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because this is your uncle, you're supposed to respect that person. You don't talk bad on that person. Because this is your auntie, because this is your this. And I used to always, as a kid, say, if I don't feel respected, why should I give this unclenching loyalty and respect to other people? So I feel like that's like at the root of a lot of cultures, is that we tend to give our like devotion and respect and loyalty to people who aren't always the most deserving, and that keeps us around toxic people.
mm. I think also it's one of those things too where it's kind of like, I don't know where it came from, but something about sweeping that stuff under the rug. In our generation, it seems like sweeping under the rug is the thing. And it's like, you do know the dirt is still under the rug. At some point, we gonna have to clean under this rug.
100%. Like, I'm seeing in the comments, like, it
Mm-hmm.
forces the family to do a deep dive. And that's a huge component, that it really makes you peel back the layers.
Yeah.
It's like holding up a mirror and forcing you to really look at yourself and saying, this wasn't right and this wasn't okay. And this happened underneath my watch. Or this person experienced this level of hurt and we never dealt with it. And when you do that, it allows you to kind of get over it on the surface area where there's so many people having their lingering impacts. Yep.
Yeah. Testify. Nobody wants to look in the mirror sometimes, so you rather hide it than confront it.
I think that's the hardest thing. Even like Mike Jack said, he had to stare at the man in the mirror to get his vibe right. Like, do
That's
you ever
sometimes
heard the
it
expression
is.
out of the mouth of babes?
Mm-mm.
So, like, that's something like my mother used to say this all of the time, that basically children are like the truth tellers. Like, there's nobody more honest than a kid.
Oh, a kid will humble the hell out you. Do you hear me?
A kid will humble the hell out of you. They'll tell you how something comes across, how it look, if it ain't right, what's okay. And that's why those are the people that we silence the most. Because ain't nobody
Because
gonna
them
give it
kids,
more honest
cause
than the
kids will
kid
hurt
in
your
their
feelings.
perspective.
Kids will hurt your feelings and break your heart and hug you afterwards.
Because they're the truth tellers.
But yeah, so it's like I get it, and like I said, that comment there, that was a really touchy one. Like that did it. Somebody said a kid will also get backhanded for get backhanded for such truths.
Right? And
Here.
you know what? That's the thing. But you know what? That's when you realize, as an adult, if you still have that truth in you, right? And you feel like you're
Mm-hmm.
calling stuff to light, and you feel like nobody wants to hear it, nobody wants to have a better understanding on where you're coming from, it's okay to respectfully take some distance. You
It is.
are no longer forced to be in certain relationships when you are an adult. I'm not saying don't make peace with those around you, because I do feel like there's a happy medium, but you don't have to subject yourself to stuff that you don't want to. We got to do better at telling ourselves that, like, I don't have to stay in a toxic family situation. I don't have to stay around toxic people if it's no longer serving or growing me. I can love you
Norm,
from a distance, and that's okay.
normalize everybody is not meant to be with you your life journey, no matter the title. I tell
No
people this
matter the title.
all the time. No matter the title, normalize that everybody is not meant to go with you the full mile. And until that becomes normalized to people, certain situations are gonna break your heart and hurt you.
Well, I think that's when you get to the real work. Like, family in the basic sense of how we discussed it, like I said, no matter who you grow up with, you can create that idea of community around you. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that people feel like once they lost some type of family, tie family connection, that you can't reestablish community. You can reestablish community if you're open to it. There are always good people that can create and rebuild a village around you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't have to stay, like you say, in no situation that is not working for you. And it's okay to walk away. Like I said, that respect has to be mutual on
Yes,
all
ma'am.
sides. So
Yes,
I
ma'am.
mean, so thank y'all for rocking with us, and
Thank
we're
you.
going to be back. So stay tuned on Thursdays, right?
Thank
If you didn't get a chance to catch all of this conversation, we're going to have this on YouTube as well. So make sure you get all of the contact information. We're going to be dropping the episode on the pages. Please make sure that you subscribe, like, follow, shoot a comment, and if there's
share.
anything that you want to say to me, Miss Swollen Woke, and my girl, Lady A Savage, slide into the DM. We ready to talk about all of it.
Thank you for all y'all comments, everybody that tuned in. Like Ms. Wellman said, comment, share, subscribe, do it all. We appreciate y'all so much for the first episode.
Yeah, we love y'all for free, Royals, okay? Have a good one.